What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Chechnya has always been Russia's mirror, the ugly, cracked kind that refuses to flatter whoever stands in front of it. When the empire feels strong, it tries to tame the Caucasus and call it stability. When the empire is weak, the very same people expose every fracture, every lie, every fear. With the Ukraine war draining resources and legitimacy, Chechnya once again tells us more about the future of the Russian state than any parade on the Red Square. To read it properly, to understand the whole situation, you have to trace the origins. From Imam Shamil's Highland defiance to Stalin's deportations, from Yeltsin's disaster to Putin's bargain with Kadyrov, from the diaspora's trauma to new digital movements like NIYSO. And then, you have to place Ramzan Kadyrov, the Kremlin's favorite executioner, in the middle of a succession-guessing game that Moscow cannot afford to lose. The problem is, the game is already lost. The Chechen story is older than the empire's latest slogans. In the 1800s, Imam Shamil did not just stage a rebellion, he anchored an identity. The Caucasian imamate was not a footnote, it was the obstacle that absorbed imperial time, soldiers, and delusions of easy victory. Russia needed Crimea and the Black Sea to breathe like a great power, and the Caucasus was the windpipe. You could conquer plains, but mountains are resilient. When the empire finally stamped its emblem on the map, it never forgot the idea that Chechens always remain themselves before, during, and after the paperwork has already been completed. You might call Chechens a part of Russia, but they will never truly be a part of the country. Then came the 20th century and the Soviet Revolution. Train cars and silence. The 1944 Chechen deportation was not administration, it was a crime. A quarter of the population gone, killed by cold, hunger, neglect, cruelty, then their land repopulated by others. Moscow later allowed a return, but return is not restoration. The Soviet Union kept the Chechen idea under glass, but it never killed the heartbeat. When the Soviet structure fell apart, the Chechen pulse got loud. Dudayev declared independence in 1991, and for a moment history moved with the speed of hope. Moscow did not see a single republic asserting itself, it saw a domino line. The response was clumsy denial of legitimacy, fear dressed as policy, and finally war. Two of them. Yeltsin's circle thought shutting down Chechen propaganda would diminish Dudayev. It only diminished themselves. The First Chechen War became a defensive war by a shrinking state against part of its own body that refused amputation. In our next chapter, let's focus more on Chechen's recent history. Putin, Kadyrov line, and everyone who they met and made disappear along the way. If you want to map Russia's 21st century, you follow the Kadyrov line. Ahmad Kadyrov started as a symbol of resistance, then became chief mufti, and then clashed with the Wahhabi factions whose rigidity was turning into a power base. That struggle, religion against ambition, broke the fragile consensus inside de facto independent Chechnya. When Putin walked onto the national stage in 1999, he needed legitimacy fast. And nothing delivers faster than war painted as counter-terrorism. Apartment bombings, aerial raids, ground offensives, the script was brutal and familiar, especially now. The twist was political. Instead of occupying forever, the Kremlin found a local partner who could kill insurgency and domesticate the narrative. And the terms were simple. Moscow bankrolls Chechnya and guarantees Kadyrov power. On the other hand, the clan guarantees Moscow the appearance of control. A constitution then comes in 2003. Ahmad becomes the president. The next year he is assassinated, and Ramzan Kadyrov conveniently steps in like a prince inheriting both a budget and a vendetta list. By 2007, the republic is a monarchy with subsidies, an army of loyalists, and laws that answer first to the palace, and only then, if ever, to the Russian constitution. Ramzan marketed himself as the Kremlin's problem solver. Need discipline in Grozny? Well, he supplies it with teeth. Need a show of loyalty in Crimea, Donbass or Georgia? He ships battalions and Instagram posts. For Putin, he is the subcontractor who does the work other governors cannot, will not or should not be seen doing. But the price is too high. Total lawlessness and disregard to anything happening inside Chechnya. Kadyrov is an untouchable god in his own region. Chechnya becomes a federal subject on paper and a personal kingdom in practice, linked to Moscow through money and fear. That arrangement looked stable when oil prices were high and budgets fat. But wars are compounding interest. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine shattered the balance sheet completely. Subsidies matter more when everything else bleeds, when everything else is much more expensive. Ethnic Russians, for example, living on $200 per month, do not exactly love special rules that apply only to North Caucasus and its leaders, posing with gold pistols. Ramzan then tried to keep even Chechen conscription limited in 2022, arguing that the Republic has already donated enough. For the Kremlin, inconvenient, for the nationalists, unforgivable. The bargain held, but the stench of unfairness reeks years later. But after all the favorable treatment, was Kadyrov finally able to achieve peace? Fragile, but peace in Chechnya like Putin always wanted. Let's try to answer this question in our next chapter. Here is where the West helps the Kremlin. Call Ramzan Kadyrov a strongman, a warlord, the leader of Chechnya, and you have already swallowed the bait. He is not the elected head of a nation. He is the federal supervisor of a conquered territory under contract. Moscow understood the power of titles when it called Ahmad president, not governor like he should have been. Give the occupation a local face and a shiny label called Chechenization, and you just turn violence into policy. Use Chechens to police Chechens, then claim consent. But then ask people who lived through it what consent looked like. Forced turnout with guns, public denunciations staged as theater, wrong glance costing a life. Anna Politkovskaya, for example, documented the mafia mechanics long before they became mainstream and before everyone realized that this is what's happening. Such as budgets padded by extortion, projects enforced with threats, the state outsourced to a clan monetizing fear basically. Inside Chechnya propaganda is total. Outside, the diaspora watches and stays silent. Because silence is what protects family members still left behind, still living inside Chechnya. You can talk privately to Chechens even across different beliefs. Salafi, Sufi, secular, traditionalist, diaspora youth, village elders, anyone. All of them will tell you more or less the same things about their lives in Chechnya. What they disagree on is what comes next. That fragmentation is not proof Kadyrov represents them. It is proof he silenced them. His authority rests on Russian power, money and fear. Take away any two, and the third simply cannot hold. Western media unfortunately confirms the reality. Words create frames, frames create policies. Treat Kadyrov as Chechnya's voice, and you erase the people he crushes. No one describes the Kremlin's appointee in Donetsk as the leader of the country. So why does Grozny, Chechnya, get different vocabulary and special treatment? Meanwhile, opposition channels like One Adat risk more than nasty comments. They risk a cousin disappearing in the village, a father dragged to a police station. Moscow's and Kadyrov's reach does not just stop at borders, it just gets more creative. Interpol tricks, passport games, threats, all this kind of stuff. When the regime wants to discredit torture reports, it drags a broken man into staged video and forces him to say that he is just fine. Just a little bit under the weather, probably a cold or something. And so lies keep working because they arrive at a gun, a camera and a budget. But in the end, there is always hope, because hope never dies. Hope that one day things will get better, and eventually they will. You cannot understand the next Chechnya without looking at new dissent. Not ministries or politicians, but regular media channels. One of them, NIYSO, emerges from one Adat orbit and says, "We are not a government in exile, we are a movement with stages. Stage 1, alliances. Stage 2, mobilize society, teach, translate faith into courage. Stage 3, resistance, sabotage, cyber attacks, pressure points. Stage 4, independence and prisoners freed." Empires tremble when opponents build sequences and actual plans, actionable plans, instead of slogans. NIYSO's play in these cases is theological. By challenging the Kadyrov state, they undercut the regime's favorite trick, sanctifying obedience. If the Muftiyat is a pillar of the palace, then show the cracks. If Kadyrov wraps policy in devotion, unwrap it with scripture saying tyranny is not fate. They publish reminders in the mother tongue because the heart hears what the colonizer does not translate. They call the palace police Russian employees, stripping glamour and reassigning blame to the occupier's payroll. They also do practical survival work, how to secure a phone before border crossing, how to respond to kidnapping, don't just pay first, publicize fast, how to identify propaganda videos and reconstruct intimidation. Yes, it's unglamorous but vital, rooted in a truth Moscow forgets. People learn faster than the authorities adapt. But does everyone in the diaspora love NIYSO? No, of course no. Some feared one orthodoxy replacing another. Some want a secular frame. Which, if you think about it, is actually good, because that argument and disagreement is what an oppressed society actually needs. A simple choice. The palace, on the other hand, prefers a binary, Kadyrov or chaos, yes or no type of choices, which are often still decided for them anyways. And so the more credible opposition exists, the less that binary scares the undecided. Now layer succession on top of this whole thing. If Ramzan weakens either health, politics or both, Moscow will choreograph the handoff. Security services will push their candidates, the National Guard theirs, the business wing their own figures, the clan will float a son, Adam Kadyrov as we know him, and the loyalists will pretend nothing is happening until everything happens too fast to react. But here's the fault line. Can the new ruler still guarantee Chechnya's existence? Putin used to juggle crises because he had budget and fear. Ukraine devoured all that. If the Kremlin cannot force unanimity on a Chechnya plan, choreography fails. If subsidies shrink, loyalties shift. If nationalism radicalizes, Grozny's status becomes a grenade. That is how you get from a palace whisper to a street fight. And more importantly, previously unspoken parties will emerge. Those who lay low right now and wait for the right moment. And I seriously doubt they would want to continue Kadyrov's work. If and when Ramzan Kadyrov steps down, is pushed or fades, the succession will test whether the Kremlin still controls Chechnya or merely rents it month to month. The candidates Moscow blesses might hold for a season, the diaspora will wait, the Jamats will build, the channels will document crimes, and the mountains will keep remembering, because they always do. Watch Grozny closely, not because it is distant, but because it is central to Putin's Russia stability. When Kremlin insists it is unbreakable, Chechnya asks the question, if your power is so legitimate, why does it require so much fear? In that question lies the countdown clock for the whole system. And when the clock gets loud enough, you don't need a special political expert to tell you that what time it is, because it is too late anyways. Well, there you have it, guys. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below, for example, Patreon memberships, where you will be able to see additional chapter at the end of the episode. Thanks much for watching, see you on Monday.